Sonic Clone Lab Rat Chapter 2, To the Rescue. Robotnik's drones had just finished their most recent quill harvest and was now dropping the sedated hedgehog back into his cage. The cage door slammed shut behind him with a loud clatter that would have made Sonic flinch if he had been able to move. All he could do was lie still, while he listened to the drones' low humming as they hovered out of the room. He slowly regained feeling and movement in his fingertips. Before too long, he was able to drag himself onto the blanket and curl up a bit. The room wasn't cold, but he often felt chills down his spine when he tried to fall asleep. He felt watched, which he probably was. A long time passed, but as usual, Sonic couldn't sleep. His body ached and he was on edge because of the constant fear that the drones would come back for the next round. When a sudden bright light lit up the dim room, the little hedgehog naturally shielded away from it by rolling into a ball. Bright light could only mean more pain. He froze when he heard an unbearably familiar voice.
This looks right.
It was Tom, which meant Sonic was already sleeping. He knew because he had this dream before, one where Tom came and saved him from Robotnik's dark prison and took him back home. Sonic still remembered the crushing despair he had felt when he had woken up and realized it wasn't real. He refused to be fooled again.
Sonic, are you here?
The whispering call of no other than Mandy sounded just outside of his cage. Sonic curled up even tighter, obsessively repeating,
"It's just a dream. It's just a dream."
in his head, hoping it'd make the hallucination go away. Even through his closed eyes, Sonic sensed that the light disappeared. He relaxed a little, thinking it was over. Then an even stronger light, like that of a flashing, made him tense up again. The light suddenly landed directly on him, making him puff out his quills in a feeble attempt to protect himself.
Sonic!
Fake Tom's voice sounded weirdly thick as he exclaimed the hedgehog's name. Dream Maddie gasped, and he heard them both come closer.
Just a dream, not real.
Sonic?
Manny's voice this time. She sounded careful, or was it worry? Sonic wasn't sure. He was still busy chanting in his mind.
Sonic, sweetie, are you okay? Can you hear us?
It was silent for a bit. Sonic almost thought about peeking out to make sure they were gone, when Fake Tom spoke again.
Here, hold this. Hold on, buddy. We'll get you out of here.
A sudden metallic snap sounded. In the silence and with his senses on high alert, it might as well have been as loud as someone screaming in Sonic's ears. He flinched hard and tensed up as much as he possibly could. After a few more snaps, a loud siren started wailing, making the panic in the small hedgehog rise to extreme levels.
Hurry!
Dream Maddie sounded anxious as well.
I'm trying.
Fake Tom responded, possibly through gritted teeth. For each snap he heard, Sonic reminded himself,
It's just a dream. Just a nightmare. Don't trust this.
After an unbearably long time, the snapping stopped.
This will do.
Maddie's voice. Suddenly, someone touched him. The touch came as a surprise to Sonic, who puffed out what was left of his quills and hissed in warning. A week's display for sure, but it was all he could do to get away from whatever tangible nightmare monster this was.
Hey, it's okay, kiddo. It's us, Maddie and Tom. Come on, we'll have to hurry before it's too late.
Maddie's voice was soft and gentle, like the touch of the hand that once again tried to pick him up, this time succeeding despite his defenses. He was lifted into a warm embrace that felt so real that he almost believed it. Almost.
Tom, the ring!
The whooshing sound of a ring portal opening could just be heard over the wailing siren. Then it disappeared. Both the siren and the stench of chemicals he'd been living with for far too long.
There, You're safe now.
Maddie gave him a quick stroke before he felt himself being lowered and placed gently on a soft surface, possibly a bed, but he still refused to look.
Sonic?
Tom's voice filled with worry and fear that almost made the hedgehog shiver.
Please, buddy. Why won't you come out? Maddie, what if he's paralyzed or something?
I don't think so, Tom. He was responsive when I picked him up, but there could be so many other.
She trailed off, her voice growing thick again.
Most likely is that he's just scared.
Scared?
That was something Sonic had always prided himself on not being. Even though he was left all alone as a child on an alien planet to fend for himself, he had rarely felt scared. Yet Maddie was right. He realized he was terrified that he would wake up any second and be back on Robotnik's operating table, getting his quills plucked out, or something worse. The mere thought made his spikes fluff up, defensively again.
Hey, buddy.
Sonic heard Tom and Maddie both settle down on the floor in front of him, but it was Tom who was speaking now.
We've been worried sick. I'm really sorry it took us so long to find you.
Tom has hardly closed an eye since we lost you.
Neither has Maddie.
It's okay. It's just us. You're safe now.
Maddie's words sounded like some sort of fairy tale, the kind of story that Sonic had grown out of believing in a long time ago. Yet, it was right in front of him. All he had to do was believe.
You're home now.
Tom's voice this time was strong and confident, not leaving any room for arguments. He wasn't sure what had convinced him, but ever so slowly, Sonic uncurled a tiny bit to peek out between his spikes. His vision was blurry from tears, but there was no mistaking the two humans sitting in front of him on the floor. Tom and Maddie, Donut Lord and Pretzelity. Tom edged a little closer, and a careful smile grew on his face when he realized that Sonic was looking. He didn't need more encouraging. Sonic uncurled and leapt into Tom's arms with a whimpering cry. Tom didn't hesitate to return the embrace. Sonic didn't know how long they stayed like that, only that he, at some point, became very aware of the fact that Maddie was crying too. He slowly detached himself from Tom's shirt and looked up at her. With a slightly trembling hand, she reached over and touched the metal contraption that was strapped over his face. The muscle had been on him since one of his very first days in Robotnik's lab. The doctor had simply said that Sonic's never-ending babbling was obnoxious and his screams distracting. It was mechanical, so whenever his meals were served, the bottom part would slide open and allow him to eat, while it was still fastened to his head.
Oh, Sonic.
She sniffled as she gently pulled him from Tom and into her own arms. Sonic nuzzled his head against her shoulder as she brought up her hand and stroked the back of his head.
I'll make him suffer for this, I swear.
Tom's lowered voice was seething in rage. Sonic would have never guessed that such words and tone could come from his Donut Lord.
Not if I get to him first.
Maddie said as she hugged Sonic a little tighter when a small shiver went down his spine.
Let's get this off of him.
She added as her hand brushed against the collar and the muzzle. Sonic hummed in appreciation. Tom edged closer and put his hand on the collar. Despite his best efforts, Sonic couldn't help but flinch and let out a little whimper. The skin beneath it was tender and hurt even at the smallest touch. Moreover, it had been drilled into Sonic's head that touch the contraption would always result in a strong electric shock.
I'm sorry, no touching.
Tom moved a hand to the blue hedgehog's ear instead and gave him a scratch behind it.
It looks like it's way too tight to loosen with the strap. I'd have to tighten it in order to loosen it. I'll get the scissors instead.
Tom shuffled through a bag for a bit before coming back with a normal pair of kitchen scissors.
I'll do it as gently and quickly as I can. Okay, buddy?
Sonic nodded as he pressed himself closer to Maddie, who in turn began to stroke his back. Tom carefully edged the scissors underneath the collar. Sonic whimpered. The collar was fastened so tightly that even making room for the scissors made the collar cut deeper into the sensitive skin.
Almost there.
Tom assured him as he began cutting and the pressure around his neck let up. A soundly sigh of relief escaped Sonic's muzzled mouth as he instinctively reached up to rub at the skin. However, Tom caught his hand before he could do it.
I don't think you should touch it, Sonic. Maddie, you should take a look.
Confusion filled the hedgehog's mind. Sure, it hurt, but it couldn't be that bad, right? His brows furrowed when his eyes wandered to the cut-off collar in Tom's hand. The collar had a box attached, which was the one that administered the voltage. From this box, there were 2 electric probes sticking out, which he knew from personal experience had been digging into his skin and sending electricity through him. These probes, he realized, were dripping with blood. Tom noticed the hedgehog's distressed look at the torture device in his hands and promptly threw it out of sight. Maddie gently shifted Sonic in her lap so she could have a look at his neck. It was bad, judging by her face that contorted into anger and worry when she saw the damages. She exchanged a quick glance with Tom, who looked equally furious.
Tom, please hand me the first aid kit.
She kept her voice calm, although it also sounded a little strained.
I'll have to clean this to avoid infection. Does it hurt anywhere else, Sonic?
She asked softly while still examining his neck. The hedgehog shook his head in response, but reached up to pull at the muzzle on his face with a whimper, wordlessly asking for its removal.
We know. We'll get to it in a second, buddy.
Tom reassured him as he handed Maddie the first aid kit and brought Sonic back into his own lap, so she had both hands free.
It looks like it's locked on and these straps are metal, so I'll have to cut it off with the wire cutter.
Yeah, and now that the collar's off, this wound is in risk of infection. It's better we start with this.
Sonic's ears flattened at the prospect of having to wait a little longer to get the uncomfortable muzzle off, but he still nodded his head in understanding.
Okay, this is disinfectant.
Maddie held a gauze swab with some strong-smelling liquid on it.
It'll help clean the wound, but it will sting a little. Are you ready?
He nodded again, and she carefully applied the solution to his wound. It did sting, and occasionally, he involuntarily winced when she hit a particularly sore spot. Tom tried distracting Sonic by scratching him behind the ear, and the attempt was greatly appreciated.
Good job.
Maddie praised him when she was done. She threw away the slightly bloodied gauze swab and took a clean one out, as well as a little bottle.
Now just one more. This kills any bacteria that might have entered the wound.
She explained as she poured the liquid from the bottle onto the gauze swab. Sonic nodded again and lifted his head to give her better access to the wound, and she repeated the treatment. This time, it didn't sting, but the skin was still very sore to the touch.
Great. Almost done now. Just need to wrap it up.
Maddie took a bandage roll and very gently dressed the wound. It was loose but secure, so it wouldn't fall off.
Perfect. We'll have to redress it soon. Normally I'd wait 12 hours, but I don't know how fast you heal. You know, it's probably faster than I expect.
She joked, attempting to cheer up the kid. Sonic pushed himself up to his feet, wanting to give her a hug in substitute for a spoken thanks. However, his legs had not carried his full weight since he was captured, and it showed. They buckled when he tried to take a step.
Whoa, careful!
Tom gasped as he and Maddie grabbed him before he fell. He hummed in gratitude, trying to voice the word thanks, which only came out as a muffled sound. But it seemed that the message was received. Maddie smiled brightly and brought him in for another hug, muttering,
You're welcome, Sonic.
She sat him on the floor between her and Tom.
Now let's get that thing off of you.
Sonic nodded excitedly, looking eagerly at the wide assortment of wire cutters that his humans had brought with them. Tom was also smiling with eagerness as he picked out one of the tools to free the hedgehog. Sonic lowered his head and presented the metal straps, keeping the muzzle in place to the Donut Lord. Tom slipped his finger under one of the straps before lodging the wire cutter underneath it as well. Maddie held both sides of the strap, while Tom cut using both hands. The snapping sound of the strap breaking was perhaps the best sound Sonic had ever heard. The muzzle itself was a nightmare to the little alien, who had used talking as a defense mechanism for an entire decade. Apart from his speed, his speech was the thing he enjoyed the most. Maddie was able to loosen the rest of the straps and carefully pull the entire thing off. Relief flooded through Sonic as he rubbed his face where the muzzle had been and opened and closed his jaw a few times. A hand rested on top of his head, and he looked up to see his own relief mirrored in Tom's eyes.
There you are. You should probably not try to speak too much before that neck of yours is better.
Maddie nodded in agreement and put her hand on his head too. It was all just a little much. Sonic sniffled and felt his eyes fill with water again. He hurriedly tried to wipe away any pesky tear that might have escaped. While halfway hiding his face in his hands, he felt himself being enveloped in a soothing and wordless group hug. Again, he didn't know how long they stayed like that, just that he didn't want it to end. He felt warm. He felt safer than he'd ever been, even before his capture. He felt loved. All of these were feelings that he wouldn't mind preserving forever. They had all badly needed that group hug. Both Tom and Maddie had their heads filled with terrible images of all the hardships and pain Sonic might have gone through in the past few weeks. They had been absolutely devastated when they saw the little alien curled in a ball and shivering at the sound of their voices. He looked terrible, that much was evident. Even before he had uncurled and revealed that appalling muzzle and jaw color he'd been forced into. His usually fluffy and spiky fur had shrunken in size. It was clear that he lost a lot of quills to that so-called doctor. A few places, he even had bare spots, where the quills and fur had been removed completely. It was obvious he had been through a nightmare, which only made the feeling of guilt and worry grow even more within both Tom and Maddie. Tom was the first to move from their little cocoon. He kissed Maddie's cheek, and that lifted Sonic into one of the beds of the hotel room, which they were currently in. Sonic looked around the room for the first time, yet a confused little frown forming on his face.
We're in a hotel room.
Tom explained as he finished tucking the hedgehog in and sat down next to him, while Maddie took the spot on Sonic's other side. It was a pretty standard hotel room with 2 twin beds, a small kitchen, and a bathroom.
We thought it'd be safer than to go home.
When Sonic didn't look less confused, Maddie continued.
Robotnik knows where we live, so we decided to go somewhere far away where he can't find you. We're in Germany. We can thank your rings for that. Tom here felt that his amazing German had to be put to good use.
She added with a light teasing look at her husband.
Hey, I did take a German class once.
Green Hills?
Sonic suddenly spoke. His voice was raspy and low. His sentence was cut short when a coughing fit interrupted him. The coughs obviously hurt his sore throat, so Tom hurriedly answered what he guessed the question would be.
Everyone's safe. He left us all alone after he took you away.
But a little hedgehog looked relieved as he sank a little deeper into the pillow behind him.
We just agreed that you'd be safer here.
Are you sure nothing else hurts?
Maddie inquired worriedly as she looked him over.
No headache or anything?
Sonic shook his head. Maddie gently picked up Sonic's hand and measured his pulse, just to be on the safe side. It was fast, but it matched up well with the last time she had checked. It was the first time she had seen his ungloved hand, she realized. Its backside had blue fur, like the rest of him. His fingers were a bit shorter than normal, almost making it look a bit like a mix between a hand and a paw. When she turned it around, she almost let out an awe escape her. He had paw print-shaped patches of peach-colored fur on his palms, which she found adorable. She vaguely remembered seeing the same sort of paw print on his feet, the first time she saw him. She was about to comment on this when she realized the kid had fallen asleep. Maddie had smiled at him fondly as she wrapped her hand around his smaller one. Both Tom and her were content with just sitting there for a bit, listening to the soft breathing of the sleeping kid, while their own tiredness slowly crept in on them.
He must have been really exhausted.
Tom whispered after a bit.
We can only guess what that man has done to him.
Maddie breathed deeply, calming herself down before she got worked up again. Tom looked at the alien between them in deep thought.
He needs us, Maddie.
Yes, I think he does.
No, I mean, like really. We'll have to be there for him no matter what.
I knew what you meant.
Maddie looked affectionately at Sonic.
Not exactly the way I imagined our family to grow, but it feels right, doesn't it?
Tom looked at his wife with a blinding smile as he leaned in to kiss her.
Well, we better get some sleep as well.
Maddie stood up and moved to the other bed in the room. The movement in the mattress caused the little hedgehog to stir a bit in his sleep before rolling onto his side towards Tom.
I think I'll stay up a bit longer.
Maddie smiled at her husband and their new son. Wow, that was something to get used to.
Sure. Good night.